Okay, folks, this is week 2 assignment, mapping composition. And I know that you guys have read the assignment already, and you can see that there's 8 images to choose. There's 8 images to choose from. You're supposed to choose 5 of 8 of them to do for this exercise. Now, I know that it seems like this is a difficult exercise when you read through, but you'll see it only takes about 5 minutes to do one of these. It's really not that big of a deal. And what we're trying to do is take a look at how things are composed on the paper, on the picture plane, versus how your eye moves around the picture plane, what the artist does to keep your eye moving around. So I'm going to be laying out, basically outlining the dominant areas of composition and less dominant areas of composition. So you can see this is the image that I chose. It's from the 36 Views of Mount Fuji series. It's really interesting, and I know that you guys have seen this image because it's one of the 8 that you can choose from. And as you can see, what we have here is what I would consider more dominant and less dominant elements of composition. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these regions. I'm going to outline these regions so that you can see them a little bit better, and then we're going to map the eye movement around the composition. So here we go. So what I've done is I've attached, like a book on the edge, a hinged piece of tracing paper that goes over the image so that we can get a look through the piece of paper at what we're doing, and we can trace the areas. So here I go. I'm going to start with a heavy Sharpie to trace the dominant areas so that those come up darker, and I'm going to use a lighter Sharpie to map the less dominant areas. So what I've got here, let's take a look here. I think some of the most dominant features of this would be, of course, this wave. And you can see I'm not overly concerned with the detail of the wave. I'm concerned about getting it outlined in the region. As you can see, I'm tracing into the picture plane as well, picture frame, excuse me, as well. So that's where the wave is, first wave. I would also say that Mount Fuji itself is a dominant part of the composition, so I'm going to outline that as well. I would also say that the birds are dominant, so I'll circle some of those. More up here. And it's important to go back and forth as you go along to take a look at all these areas. And now, the last thing that I would say would be dominant would be this area that the tree is on. So now that I've got those mapped out, I'm going to put a quick hatch into them so that they show up a little bit better. This will take a few minutes. And as you can see, after I put the hatch in, these show up as about a mid-gray, middle gray. A few more marks here. Let's also do the same thing to Mount Fuji, off in the distance. Even though it is off in the distance, I would consider this a more dominant area of composition. And of course, the tree over here. And of course, the picture plane. So here are our areas. And birds, just fill these in just a little bit so that they show up a little bit better. Now I'm going to map the less dominant areas, and I would say that would be the wave that's beneath the dominant wave. It would also be this boat. And as you can see, I'm not worrying a whole lot about the detail. This would also be the shoreline. So I'm going to use a lighter hatch for those So in essence, we've mapped pretty much all of the elements that make up the composition. Now what we want to do is we want to take a look at the way your eye moves around the composition. So I'm going to open this up again and take a look. Now when I quickly look at this, my eye is moving around this area here. So I'm going to mark that with a colored marker. And I would say it goes kind of like this. Linear eye movement. It's not a region. I'm not going to hatch it. I just want to take a look at it. My eye moves like that. Now, as I come farther down, my eye moves around this area. This line that's cut off between the waves seems to be a pretty dominant area. So I'll mark it like that. And then lastly, my eye tends to go farther into the image and looks at the three little boats over here. So I'm going to mark those three little boats. And that's pretty much all I'm looking for you to do with this. So choose 5 images and use dominant and less dominant regions. I should say mark dominant and less dominant regions with 2 different styles of hatch. Or you could also use colored markers. You could use paint. You could use anything that you want to do this. And then use a contrasting color to mark the eye movements within the page. Okay? That's pretty much it. The last thing that I'm going to show you guys today, just like I did last week, is I'm going to show you quickly how to lay out your grid for your color study. So here's a blank piece of paper. Here's what our color study is going to look like. And I've laid one out here earlier so that you get a sense of what it's supposed to be. All right, remember, 6 squares across, 7 up and down. This middle strip here will be your full chroma colors, just the colors by itself. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. Now, the paints that I've asked you to buy are only red, yellow, and blue. So to create orange, green, and purple, you're going to have to mix the 2 colors together. You're going to have to mix the blue and the yellow to get the green, the blue and the red to make the purple, and the red and the yellow to make the orange. So you're going to have, again, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple across here. Now, once you have your colors here, your full chroma colors, you're going to mix 3 levels of quote-unquote gray, where you're going to be basically heading towards white, here, here, and here. This will be the lightest, middle, least light. And in the same thing, you're going to be making them darker. Add a little bit of black, a little bit more black, a little bit more black, to give you a hue that is slightly, a shade that is slightly darker than the original color. Right, so a little bit darker than that, and a little bit darker than that. Try to keep those steps very similar, as in your value study from week 1. Okay, so here's my blank piece of paper, and I'm going to lay this grid out. Again, I want to keep this thing centered. And I know I have 6 across, and I have 7 vertically. So again, I'm going to do this with a number 2 pencil. You guys should be doing this with a mechanical pencil to keep those lines very, very light, because you're going to be filling in those squares with paint. I'm going to do this darker so that you can see what I'm doing on this paper. So there's 14 inches across, and of course 7's my midline. And I've got a total of 6 squares, so from the midline, 3 in either direction. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Same thing on the other side. 14's my overall length. Make my mark at 7. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So we've got 6 squares in that direction. Now in the long direction, direction, we have 7 squares. That's an odd number of squares, so the center of that will be a single square in itself. So there's 17 inches. Find the halfway point of 17 inches, which is 8.5. Little mark there. And then I'm going to come off of that mark a half inch in either direction to get that first square. Right, so there's 1 inch, that's 1 square. Now, 3 more in either direction will get us to 7. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Same thing on the other side. Hopefully this is looking familiar from last week's project. Half inch to either side. There's our first square. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And now we have these series of marks all the way around the outside, and we can draw the lines to make the grid. So here I go. Across. Went a little too far in that outside direction. That's okay. I can erase those later. Now, I'm going to repeat this again, but I am doing this with a number 2 pencil, and I'm making this grid very dark so that you can see it on the camera. But again, you guys should be doing this with a mechanical pencil with very, very light lines, because you don't want to see those lines after painting the squares with your tints and shades off of the hues. See, as I do this, I'm lining it up to the points that I've made earlier. There we go. Now, I have some extra lines. I'll take a minute and erase these. Lines to the outside, I definitely don't need to be looking at those. Erase those. And this would be much easier if you were doing this with a mechanical pencil, because I bared down pretty hard to get these lines to show up. We are 6 by 7 inch grid, 6 squares across, 7 squares high, and you can see it is nicely centered on our piece of paper. And that's it for visual communications week 2 assignments.